purpose of this lesson is to learn what a loop is and the different types of loops that you can use, when to use a for, while, or do loop, an introduction to arrays, the different types of arrays and dimensions, and how to combine loops and arrays. When writing a program, you may encounter times when you have to perform a task over and over again. You end up with these repetitive tasks that waste a large amount of coding time. And the reason for it is that we'll start typing the same code over and over again. It becomes very repetitive. So what we can do is we can use a loop to fix those repetitive code sections. If it's something where I needed to perform the same task over and over again, or if I needed to perform it a certain number of times, or if I needed to ask the user for input or things of that nature, we can put that into a loop, and then we use this thing called a counter to keep track of how many times we actually performed it, or how many iterations we've gone through. Alright, so there are different types of loops that we can encounter. There's what's called a definite loop. This is going to be something like, I know the loop has to run exactly 10 times. So a definite loop runs a specific number of times. I know exactly how many times it's going to run, and that's it. When it gets to the end, it's done. And then we have what's called an indefinite, which is it's going to keep running until something occurs to cause it to stop. Maybe the user enters data, like if I say keep entering numbers until you enter 999 to quit. So that's an indefinite loop. And then we have an infinite loop, and the infinite loop is the program runs forever. There's no way to ever get out of the loop. As far as the user is concerned, the program has crashed or stops responding. You do not ever want an infinite loop. Indefinite is okay, infinite is not. Alright, so a for loop, this is going to be when I know that I have a definite loop, I know exactly how many times I need something to run. It requires three parts. We have a counter, a conditional statement, and then our increment or decrement statements. So the way that it looks is like this, where we say the word for, we have a counter. In this case, we call it k. K just for some reason is our counter, probably because k and counter start with the same sound. But k is our counter. We start it at 0. While k is less than 10, we're going to perform some tasks. And then every time this thing runs, we increment k by 1. We talked about this before, that plus plus k is the same as saying k equals k plus 1. So we're going to increment k. Conversely, we can decrement it, so we can start at 100. So our counter in this case, it actually says x, it should be k. But if we start off our counter at 100 and then go down to 0, so while k is greater than or equal to 0, then we decrease by 1, then we'll cause our loop to run 100 times. A while loop is used for an indefinite loop. This is going to be, I don't know how many times it should run. It only requires a conditional statement. We usually put the counter and the increment and decrement in the body, but it could be that we don't need a counter for a while loop. A for loop has to have a counter. A while loop does not. So in this case, we could say while k is less than 100, then we're going to increase k, and we'll keep doing all this. Or while something is not true, go ahead and keep doing this. So whatever the condition is to get out of it, we're going to keep doing this until the condition is true. And then we also have a thing called a do-while loop. Now a do-while loop and a while loop both function exactly the same, except for one small difference. And the one small difference is that the do loop is going to cause the body of the loop to run at least one time. So let's say I know for a fact I need the loop to run one time. I'm going to let the loop run, do the one thing, and then we'll evaluate. So the difference is in a while loop, we say while k is less than 100, do all of this stuff. In a do loop, we say, hey, do this stuff here, and then evaluate to see if this is true or not. So the while condition is at the end after it actually performs the body of the loop one time. We have these things called arrays. Now we talked about variables already, and a variable is nothing more than a memory location that can store one value. An array is kind of like a variable, except that it can store more than one value. And the way that this works is, think of like a table, or even a drop-down list or something like that, because that's typically where we'll end up using an array. But an array can hold multiple values, but each value is referenced by the name of the array and an index number called a subscript. So what I could have is an array called names, and I could have names element 0 is Bob, and names element 1 is Jane, and names element 2 is Joe, and so forth. So even though they are separate values, they're all referenced as part of the same array. Now in C#, our array starts at index number 0 and then goes up to 1 less than the length of the array. And the length of the array just simply means how many elements do we have. So if I have an array that has 10 names in it, then my length is 10 because there are 10 names in it. But my indexes would go from 0 up through 9 because 9 would be 1 less than the length of the array. To declare an array in C#, it's a little different than other programming languages. We have to specify the length of the array, and once we specify its length, we cannot change that length. In some programming languages, you have the ability to keep adding to the array or deleting elements from it. In C#, it is strongly typed, therefore when we declare the array and we declare the length of the array, that length cannot change. Now, we can always make a copy of the array and then change the length that way, but in the pure sense of an array, we cannot change the length of it. Alright, so what we do is we declare that we're going to make an array of integer data types, and you notice the square brackets. The square brackets designate that this is an array. We're going to call it myArray, and we're going to set it equal to a new integer array of 3 elements in length. That's what this means over here. So to declare this array, this is the actual way that we specify that we're making the array, and we've told it set aside 3 spaces for names or whatever we want to put into it, but we haven't actually told it what to put into the array yet. Then the next step is to reference each memory location. So I can say myArray0, which remember 0 is the first one, is equal to 2. So what we're going to do is we're going to put the number 2 in the first array element. And then myArray1, which is the second array element, we're going to put the number 4. And then myArray2, which is the third element, we'll put the number 8. Alright, so this is the long way to do it. There is actually a shortcut way to do it. Now the shortcut only works if I populate the entire array when I declare it. Alright, so in this case I'm making a new integer array called myArray, which is equal to a new integer array of 3 elements in length. And then in curly brackets over here, I simply put 2, 4, and 8, which is the same as doing these 3 lines of code up here. We can also have multi-dimensional arrays, which a multi-dimensional array would be things like, think of an Excel spreadsheet where you have a table. And I can have columns, and then columns are rows, and then each row would have multiple values. So maybe the first row is my first friend. And the first row has the first column, which has their name, and the second column has their telephone number in it. So what we can do is we can reference the array that we have element 0, but element 0 has 2 sub-elements to it. So friend array 00 is Bob, 01 would be his phone number. Okay, so this is the second person is element 1, and then element 1, 0 is Jane, so 0 would be the name, 1 would be their telephone number, and so forth. Now we can also use the shortcut to declare it, and the way that we do this, you say string, that's the data type, and then array. Now notice the comma in here. The comma specifies that it is a multi-dimensional array. And then we're going to call it friend array, set it equal to a new string array of 2 elements in length, and then our elements are going to be Bob with his phone number and Jane with her phone number. We typically want to use a loop to populate and read data from these arrays. What happens is we're going to use an array to store things like phone numbers and telephone numbers, friend names. We're going to store things like grades, and then we want to populate the array, and then we want to read stuff out of the array. We want to perform functions with the array to try to get things like averages for grades and things of that nature. Well, to do this, I'm going to use a loop to populate the array and another loop to read the data back from the array. And what that'll do is it'll significantly reduce the amount of time and the amount of code that's required for us to be able to populate and read from the array. Alright, so I made a new console-based application, and what I want to do with this app is I want to start playing with loops. Alright, so I'm going to make a for loop, and this is just going to be a basic for loop. And what I need to do is I need to declare a counter. Now the thing is if I just say k is equal to 0, whoops, it won't let me do it. Okay, so it actually comes up and it tries to populate something else. Alright, so what I have to do is I have to tell the system that I'm going to use an integer value called k. So I'm going to come up here and declare it. And I'm just simply going to say int k. Okay, so what that does is that makes an integer value, or an integer data type variable called k. And then now what I can say is k is equal to 0. Now notice it actually let me do it. Alright, and then while k is less than 10, what I want it to do is I want it to increment k. So I'm going to do plus plus k. It's just 1k. Alright, so now what will happen is I'm going to cause it to run and do stuff. So it's going to do all of the stuff that occurs in the curly brackets after this. Alright, so what I want it to do is I want it to write on the screen what number it's on. So I'm going to say console.writeLine. And then we're just simply going to write k. Alright, so what I want it to do is I want it to write out to the screen what iteration it's on. So what happens is we have this integer data type variable called k. K is our counter. We started off at 0. While k is less than 10, so it'll increment k by 1. So what happens is it runs through, it prints out k. So the first time k is 0. Okay, so then the next thing it does is it will increment k. So now k is 1. K is still less than 10. So it will perform this again and increment k. Alright, so go ahead and run this. I forgot my console.read. Alright, so go ahead and run it again. And there we go. So now we get 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Alright, so now let's say I wanted this thing to count from 1 to 10. Well, what I could do is I could change my counter here. So I'm going to start this at 1. So start k at 1, run this, and now it goes from 1 through 9. Okay, well I wanted 10. Alright, so what I can do is I can make this k less than or equal to 10. And there we go. So depending on where you start your counter and depending on how high you go up with your counter, so where your limit is, will dictate if you get 0 through 9 or 1 through 10. So just be aware of that. But this is a for loop. This is a definite loop. We definitely know how many iterations there are going to be. We know it's going to happen 10 times. Therefore, that's a for loop. Alright, so now I declared this variable k up here, but I actually don't have to do this. I can declare it right here inside of our for loop. So if I'm using k just strictly for the purpose of being the counter for this for loop, I'm going to declare it right here inside of the loop itself. The reason for it is if I declare it up here, that variable will live throughout the rest of this program. If I declare it here, it will only exist for the duration of my for loop. Alright, so I want to modify this a little bit. Let's do a while loop. Now a while loop really shouldn't be used for a definite type of loop, but I'm going to show you how to do it. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to say while k is less than or equal to 10. Okay, so that's our evaluation. Then what we want to do is we want to do our console.write. Now the problem with this one is we really would have to have k declared ahead of time. Now if I run this, what's going to happen is I have an integer k. K is not declared yet. And notice k is underlined. And notice it says use of unassigned local variable k. The reason for that is when we do a while loop, we have to initialize our counter before we can actually have this loop. It won't even let us compile it. Alright, so we start off k as 0. While k is less than 10, do this stuff. Alright, so if I do this, if I start my program, notice it continually runs to 0. I just created an infinite loop. It will never stop running. Alright, so to break this program, I'm going to do Control-C, and that will actually exit my program. Alright, so what I need to do is I declare my variable for my counter. I have my condition for the counter for how high we want to count, but then I need to increment my counter by 1. And so I'm going to show you a couple of ways I can do it. I can do k is equal to k plus 1. And if I do it before the console.WriteLine, I will end up with something like this where it goes 1 through 11. I could place it here. And now we get 0 through 10. Now notice I had k is less than or equal to 10, so I need to change this to less than. And so now if I do this, I'm going to run it, and I get 0 through 9. So there will be a difference based on where I put my incrementing. So do I want it before or after the write line? And if I want it to count from 1 through 10, I'm going to do it before the write line. And the reason for it is because my k started off at 0. Now if I started at 1, that would make a difference. Alright, so k equals k plus 1 is fairly inefficient. Whenever we're doing these, we always want to do our prefix increment. So I'm going to do plus plus k, and then run it, and I still get 1 through 10. Now, that's my while loop. I also can have a do loop, so I'm going to take this and move it to the end. And then I'm going to type the word do up here. Okay, so do all of the stuff that's inside of here while this is true. And so what it'll do is it'll force it to run this at least one time before it actually evaluates the while section. Now in this case I don't get anything different because it did run anyhow, but what this does is if I'm trying to do something like to ask you if you want to enter a grade or if you want to enter a friend's name, then I need it to ask you at least once, and therefore I'm going to do a do loop. But if it's something where I don't care if it happens at least once, then I'm going to use a while loop. Alright, I'm going to use this do loop, but I'm not going to use a counter this time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask the user to enter a grade, and I'm going to ask you if you want to enter another grade. So what we're going to do is we're going to say console.WriteLine enter a grade. Okay, so we're going to tell the user to enter a grade. Actually, we're going to prompt them like this. Okay, so we'll say console.write enter a grade. And then what we're going to do is we're going to keep doing this while they don't enter 999. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to have a variable that is going to take whatever they type into the console and we're going to put that into some string value. Alright, so I'm actually going to just declare this string value right here, and I'm going to call it str grade, and that's going to be equal to console.readline. So we're going to take whatever they write or whatever they typed at the console, and we're going to put that into str grade. And then the next thing we need to do is make it a double value so that way they can have decimal amounts. And we'll call this dbl grade is equal to convert.to double, and that's str grade. Alright, and then when they enter the grade, then we're going to do something like console.WriteLine your grade is, and then we're going to do a character substitution here so we can display what the grade was, and then we're going to say dbl grade. And maybe I want to have a couple of line breaks here so that way, oops, that way at the end of this it's going to provide some line breaks to us, and then do a couple more afterwards, make it look a little bit nicer on the screen. Now when I say enter your grade, I didn't tell the user how to get out, and we'll tell them that here in just a second. But I want to make it that if the user does not enter 999, I want it to keep doing this. I'm going to say while dbl grade is not equal to 999. Okay, so what I need to do is I'm going to say enter a grade, and I'm going to tell the user how to get out of this thing. So I'll say something like, let's say 999 to quit. And what that does is that it provides a little visual cue to the user, hey, here's how to get out of this loop. Alright, so we're going to say enter a grade or 999 to quit. We're going to take whatever they type in, we're going to put that into str grade. We're going to convert str grade to a double and put it into dbl grade. And then we're going to say your grade is, and then whatever dbl grade is. Okay, so it says there are errors. Now dbl grade is not declared here in this context, so actually I have to declare it above. So I'm going to come up here, dbl grade, oops, it's a double. Alright, so we have double dbl grade, and then now it's declared in that context. Okay, so my first grade is 50, so your grade is 50. Enter another grade, 90. Your grade is 90. Next grade, 30. Next grade, 80. Now, if I do 999, if the value that I enter matches the amount they get out, then the system will display my grade, and then notice it's not prompting me for another grade. It is actually sitting at our console.read at the bottom, and then when I press enter, now the program is done. So I made an indefinite loop, which means I don't know how many times the user is going to keep going through the loop, but it'll keep going until we get to some value, which is called a sentinel value. So this is our sentinel value right here. If dbl grade is equal to 999, that's how we get out. Once we get to the sentinel value, then the program stops running and we're out of the loop. The reason that I did this as a do loop instead of a while loop is I wanted it to run at least one time to ask them for a grade. And as they enter their grades, then we're going ahead and populate it, and then we'll display the output. I want to show you how to shorten this just a little bit. I have a variable here called strgrade that I really don't need. It's just there for the purpose of taking whatever was written in by the console and then allowing me to put that into a text string and then converting it to a double. If you look at what strgrade is equal to console.readLine. What I can do is I can actually cut this from here and replace strgrade down here. Now what this does is it kind of nests these a little bit, but what it will do is significantly shorten my program. So now dbl grade is equal to something that was read from the console that is converted to a double gets put into dbl grade. So this program will still work the same way, but instead of having 2 lines of code, now I have just that 1 line of code to get the data from the command or from the console. So I can put everything into a text string if I want to, or I could leave it as just simply doing the read line and converting that all as 1 line. So I can shorten things if I need to. I want to make an array that contains the names of friends and their addresses, and their telephone numbers. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and delete this. I don't need this. I'm going to make an array, which is a string array, and the first one is just simply going to be a list of names. So it's a string array. I'm going to call it friend array, and then it's a new string array that has 3 friends in it. Okay, so I have this string array. Now I have the array that is 3 elements in length, but it doesn't have anything in it yet. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do friend array, and then element 0 is equal to Bob. Oops, and Bob is in quotes because it's a text string. Okay, and friend array element 1, which is the second element, is equal to Jane. And then friend array element 2, which is the last element in my array, is equal to Frank. So these are the 3 friends. Alright, so what I can do is I can write these out to the screen. So I'm going to say console.writeLine, and then we're going to write friend array, if I spell it right, friend array element 0. And I'm just going to copy this because it's going to be the exact same line 3 times. So element 1, element 2, And so now we're going to populate the array with these three friends. We'll display it out to the screen, and there are our three friends. Okay, so we populated Bob, Jane, and Frank into friend array 0, 1, and 2. Then we read back friend array 0, 1, and 2. All right, so what if I had an array with 5 friends? Then what I would have to do is I'd have to have 2 more of these lines and 2 more of these lines. What if I had 50 friends? Okay, I'd have 47 more of these lines and 47 more of these lines. What if I had 500 friends? What if I had an unknown number of friends? And the thing is that I don't necessarily have to have it hard-coded for each individual friend. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I want to make the same type of thing here where it will ask for the friends and then output the friends. And what I can do is, instead of doing it this way, I can use a loop to populate my array. Alright, so I'm going to say for, it's a for loop, and I'm going to make a counter called k, start it off at 0 because 0 is our first element, and then while k is less than, and we have a special property of the friend array. The friend array has a dot property, and if I look through here, you will see that it has a length value. And what happens is the length is however many items are in it. Automatically it will know. So while k is less than the number of things that are in the array, increment k by 1. And then what we're going to do is we're going to ask the user to put data into it. Alright, so what I'm going to do is, in this case, it's friend array, and not necessarily the number 0, but I can use k, because k is our counter. And what k will be the first time we run through is 0. And then we increment k by 1, now k becomes 1. Increment k by 1, it becomes 2, and so forth. So I can reference friend array k, which is an element number. It's a variable for the value for the element for friend array. And we're going to equal that to console.readline. So we're going to let the user type in the name of the friend, and we're going to put it into friend array. Alright, so I'm going to delete this down here and leave these just so you can see what happens. So now, oh, and I forgot to prompt for it, so let's go ahead and prompt. Let's do this. We're going to say console.write, enter your friend's name. Okay, so we're going to prompt them to enter the friend's name, then they're going to, whatever they type in, we're going to read that in and put it into the array. Okay, so enter your friend's names. This is Bob, Jane, and Frank. And we end up with Bob, Jane, and Frank. So the exact same thing we had before. Alright, so what I can do is I can also change my output to another for loop, which just happened to be the exact same thing. So k is going to be started at 0. While k is less than friend array dot length, add 1 to k, so it looks exactly the same for the output as it would for the input. And then now what we're going to do is console.writeLine, friend number, and we're going to make this a little fancy, so friend number 0 is, and then 1, so we can know which friend we're on. Okay, so now where does the 0 come from? Well, the 0 is the friend number is k, so whatever k is. And then the friend name is 1, so that's going to be friend array k. Alright, and I can get rid of these 3 lines of code now. And there we go. So now we're populating the array with this one. Let's actually go and make our declare array. This one here populates the array, and this one reads contents of array. So now what happens is if I run this, same thing as before, I have Bob, Jane, Frank. So friend number 0 is Bob, friend number 1 is Jane, friend number 2 is Frank. Then now what happens is it doesn't matter how long my array is. Okay, so watch this. So now if I have 5 friends, if I make my array 5 users in length, so now what I can do is Bob, Jane, Frank, Joe, Sherry. There we go. So what it's doing for me is it is keeping track of all the people in the array. All I have to specify is how long the array is, how many friends do I have, and then it'll automatically ask me for the number of friends that it thinks that there are. So I didn't change my code at all to increase the number of friends that I can have. I could have 50 friends, and all I do is just change in one little spot right here how many friends there are, and that will automatically change my program to allow me to populate the friend array with 50 friends, and then it will read back with the 50 friends. Alright, so I change this back to 5 friends, and I want to show you something. Let's say I type in Sherry, Bob, Frank, Joe, and Jack. When I do this, it will display them back to me in the exact same order that I put them in. But what if I want them in alphabetical order? And I can actually very easily do that. There's a built-in function that will allow me to sort my array. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a section of code here to sort the array. And so what I'm going to do is array dot sort. And then what array do I want to sort? Well, I want to sort friend array. And then what this will do for me is it'll automatically put that in alphabetical order. So now if I do Sherry, Bob, Jane, Jack, and Frank, it will put them in alphabetical order for me. I don't have to do anything special. It just automatically will sort them for me. Alright, what if I want to keep track of their phone numbers and I want to keep track of their names? And I can do that. I can modify this a little bit. I'm going to get rid of this array.sort because that's not the purpose of this next section. What I want to do is I want to create an array, and it's a multi-dimensional array. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to specify that my array has 5 friends in it still, but those 5 friends have multiple elements. And what I'm going to do is here it says string, and then it has the square brackets. I'm simply going to put a comma in the middle. And what that does is that will make it a 2-dimensional array. And a 2-dimensional array will allow me to make the array so that each friend can have a phone number also. Alright, now what this is going to do is it's going to make it where my friends are going to have their name, they're going to have their phone number, but I have to keep track of what is what with each person's name. Alright, so this is no longer friend array K, this is friend array K, comma 0, because that's going to be their name. But now I also have friend array, and then in this case K, comma 1, which is going to be their telephone number. And so what I need to do is prompt for their phone number. So we'll say console.write enter the phone number. Oops. 11 IntelliSense, but sometimes it does that for you. Alright, so we're going to say enter the friend's name, enter their phone number. And what you'll notice here is that we're going to put friend array K, which the first time is going to be 0, 0, and then 0, 1. Next time we run through it'll be 1, 0, 1, 1. The next time we run through it'll be 2, 0, 2, 1, and so forth. So what we're doing is 0 is going to be their phone or their name, and then 1 is going to be their phone number. So then what we have to do here is we're going to modify this just a little bit. So this is their name is K, comma 0, and we'll do something like friend number 0 is so-and-so, and the phone number is whatever 2 is. Okay, so 2 is going to be friend array, and then this time it's going to be K, comma 1. So 0 is their name, 1 is their phone number. And say an invalid. So what do I have that's not right? It wants a square bracket. There it goes. Okay, so I had a curly bracket and one a square bracket. Now the other thing that I have to do is I also have to specify up here where it says new string 5. I have to specify how many sub things do we have. So I have 5 friends, and each friend will have 2 things. They'll have a name and a phone number, and I have to specify that for this to work right. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and start this. And so Bob is our friend, and the phone number is 555-1212. Okay, so the next friend is Jane, which is 555-2323. And we have Joe, which is 555-3434. We have Sherry, which is 555-4545. And then we have Ann, which is 555-5656. Okay, then we have another friend here is going to be Larry. And actually encountering an error here, so let's see what the error message is. Okay, the error message is that it was outside the bounds of the array. So what that means is that I tried to input data for an array that was beyond the length of the actual array. Now here's the reason why this occurred. I specified that my array has 5 friends and each friend has 2 items. They have a name and a phone number. What the system will do is it'll multiply these, so there's 10 elements as far as it's concerned, so the length here actually breaks. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to hard code this to be that while it's less than 5. And the same thing here, I have to specify that this is going to be less than 5 because I don't have 10 elements to play with. Alright, so let's go ahead and try it again. So Bob is 555-1212, Jane is 555-2323, and Joe is 555-3434, Larry is 555-5656. Oops, and I accidentally pressed enter there, so we have a friend named 5656 who has a phone number of 77. Alright, so there we go. So anyhow, what happens is I've stored it as the first thing is the name. So your friend number 0 is Bob, and the phone number is the second element there. Then we loop around, so the next one is friend number 1 is Jane, and the phone number is 555-2323. The next one is Joe, so here's Joe, and the phone number is 555-3434. And then Larry, I messed up his telephone number when I typed it in, but you can see how it is storing their names, and it doesn't matter now how many friends I have. All I have to do is specify here how many friends there are, but I would have to specify here, I would specify here and here. Alright, so what I could do to actually fix this problem is I could declare how many friends I have. So I could do something like make a constant. So I'm going to make an integer value, and a constant we typically will put as all caps. So I'm going to put this as num friends and set that equal to 5. Okay, and then what I can do here is where we have 5, oops, forgot semicolon, where I had the 5 here, I could type num friends. And where I have my 5 here, I have num friends. And then where I had my 5 here, we have num friends. And then now what this does for me is I can change how many friends I have. It'll automatically update all 3 of these down below, and I no longer have to manually change them. I just change it one spot. So I have 5 friends. So Bob, Jane, Joe, Larry, and Sherry. And there we go. So I still end up with 5 friends. I still end up with the program working the exact same way. But now if the number of friends changes, all I have to do is change that in one spot for that constant value up there, just to designate how many friends there are. In this lesson, you learned what a loop is and about the different types of loops. So you learned about definite, indefinite, and infinite loops. Make sure you don't ever create an infinite loop. That's one you can never get out of. You learned when to use a for, a while, and a do loop. Make sure you know that the For loop is typically used for definite loops. While and do loops are indefinite, so we don't necessarily know how many times that they run, but a do loop, we know that we need it to run at least one time before we evaluate it. You learned about arrays, what they are. You learned about the different types of arrays, a multi-dimensional array versus a single-dimensional array. And you also learned how to use a loop to manipulate the arrays.